Revered and respected by our ancestors for thousands of years, demonized and suppressed by the war on drugs, and now at the dawn of a new millennia, they are making their triumphant return. Scientists, researchers, and patients alike are exploring these ancient therapies to heal modern ailments. And we're here to bring you the latest in scientific research, cutting-edge practices, and first-hand experiences from those who have been transformed in body, mind, and spirit by plant medicines from cannabis to psilocybin to ayahuasca and beyond. This is the Plant Medicine Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Plant Medicine Podcast. I'm Dr. Lynn Marie Morsky, your guide on this journey, and today we are talking psychedelics and meditation with Nate Macanian. Nate is a meditation teacher and psychedelic guide from New York. With a background in cognitive neuroscience, Nate has been creating mindfulness content for some of the world's leading meditation apps like Calm, Simple Habit, and Wellness Coach, as well as retreat centers like Synthesis and Omega Institute. Now, I hope that you guys find this as useful as I did, because meditation is a thing that we can bring into our everyday lives and get a little glimpse of some of the benefits that I think psychedelics help us glimpse as well. And we have that discussion about the symbiosis between the two and some of the similarities. So I hope that you can bring what you learn in this episode into your everyday life. Now, before we get started, just a reminder that the Plant Medicine Podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Nothing here is to be construed as medical or legal advice. All right, now without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, Nate.
Thank you for having me. A delight to be here.
I'm very excited to talk about this topic because it's something that I think a lot of people can apply, especially if we're talking maybe lower doses of psychedelics, but also when we're talking about meditation that can mimic the effects of psychedelics, then that can bring psychedelic effects into more people's lives even sooner than waiting for more legalization and decriminalization and that kind of thing. And we can start experiencing some of the benefits today. So Nate, if we could just get a little bit of your background and hear a bit about how you got into meditation and psychedelics.
Sure. Yeah, so it started when I met an elder guru in the high mountains of the Himalayas. No, I'm just joking. It was it was very simple. I was a college student at the University of Michigan, and I took a class on social psychology, and we did a chapter on mindfulness. And in their class, we did a little guided meditation, 5 minutes. I looked over at my friend and he was like, "Man, that was so stupid." And I was like, "Dude, that was amazing." So I go home, plug in my headphones, go on YouTube, start looking up meditations, close my eyes. I'm pretty sure that first meditation on my own, I fell asleep, but I thought I had transcended the cosmos. So I got off to a good start. And I just kept diving deeper and deeper over the course of my years as a student. I ended up co-founding a student organization on campus called Awaken Ann Arbor. And we would get together every week. We would practice meditation. We would bring in yoga teachers, Buddhist monks. We would watch videos and documentaries on spiritual growth. We'd have vegan potlucks, go on nature walks. It was really an organized group of hippies on campus, but we had a lot of fun. And within a year, we had grown to hundreds of members. I was put in a position at the age of 20 years old of teaching meditation to circles of many, many students, which is really unique and not many people start that way. So as I was still just getting a grasp on meditation, I was also facilitating these group experiences. And after I graduated college, I continued down this path. I taught meditation with children in outdoor education contexts in Colorado. I taught corporate wellness classes throughout New York, California. I was hosting mindfulness support groups for cancer patients in hospitals, for widows, physical therapy centers, community centers. And so that's sort of what led me to um, being sort of a meditation professional. And in 2017, I stepped into the digital meditation world, I started working with mindfulness apps. Many people are familiar with Calm and Headspace, and I've worked with a good handful of those companies. I was with Calm when they were a 12-person office, and have spent the past couple of years creating mindfulness content for many other apps too. Tying in the psychedelic stuff, I'm going to go back to the college years. Awaken Ann Arbor really became more than a meditation group. It became a group of students who were interested in spiritual growth. And naturally, a subset of those college students were curious about entheogens and plant medicines. And so, yeah, it was another really interesting situation where at such a young age, still being pretty inexperienced myself, I was put in a position where I was facilitating these psychedelic experiences for students in the local arboretum. I didn't even know that there was such thing as facilitating. I didn't know that there was an art to this, a science to this, a context for this, but it's what I was doing. And so I've been intertwining these two practices for a number of years now. I'm deeply curious about how contemplative practices, including meditation, but also things like yoga, breath work, can augment psychedelic journeys, and how psychedelic experiences can help us bring more mindfulness into our day-to-day life.
Ooh, I love that. I'm really excited to explore all of those topics because when I think about this topic, I'm thinking, okay, first I think of how can psychedelics improve meditation? And then I think, well, how can meditation mimic psychedelics without even having to do them? And then I remember, oh, that's right, meditation in and of itself after a psychedelics experience is very often part of integration. So there are just so many ways that these two areas overlap and intertwine and have like a symbiotic relationship. So I'd love to dive on in, but I'm also going to just start with telling the listeners I may be where you all are. So if I have been trying to meditate, let's say since 2016, have learned a few different methods, never found one that really jived with me. And frankly, I you will occasionally take a microdose of either psilocybin or cannabis, and then I'll put on like a Joe Dispenza meditation. And then I finally get to some feeling that I feel like the meditation is doing something. So I feel like those substances help me. But that same feeling that I get, I've definitely had in like breathwork sessions, but have not been able to get it in meditation alone. And so maybe you could start by telling people if there are, maybe explaining if what type of meditation people do, if there's any, big differences, or if we could just kind of lump them all together and discuss as one.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, and many people are where you are, Lynn Marie. I was there for a while myself. Yeah, I think meditation is an umbrella term, and that's important to understand. In the same way that you could use a word like sport and refer to activities that are as different as football and tennis are, you could use a word like meditation and refer to practices that are as different as love and kindness meditation, which is more compassion focused, to a sensory body scan meditation, which is very physically focused, to breath work, which is a whole nother thing. So I think all of these have a place, and everyone plugs into the practice in their own unique way. I'm coming from a background of mindfulness meditation, which is what many people think of today when they consider what meditation is in a secular context. And that includes breath work, that includes very simple noticing practices, it includes the stress reduction techniques that we're hearing a lot about in pop media. And so it's important to also zoom out and ask, well, what binds all of these practices together of meditation? Why are we calling compassion meditation the same word as a sensory meditation? And when I think of it, I think of it in terms of intention. Right? If I'm going to sit here on my chair right now and close my eyes, what's the difference between me sitting here just being how I would normally be and sitting here with my eyes closed and meditating, right? And I think the idea is to have an intention. a place for us to anchor our attention and our awareness. So, if we're doing a compassion meditation, in this case, we're anchoring our awareness in those feelings of love and kindness, feeling the good vibes. And when we get distracted and our mind wanders, then we're able to come and bring it back to that intention. Now, what does that have to do with psychedelics? I think it's actually a really interesting interaction because psychedelics are often lumped into the categories of intentional use and less intentional party use, recreational use. So, when we're talking about plant medicine, if you're going to sit in a plant medicine retreat, journey, experience, chances are you're preparing for the experience in a way that's deeply intentional. You're showing up to your trip with very clear focus points for when you're in the midst of your journey. Where are you bringing your attention back to? What are you really hoping to get out of the experience? And so, meditation as a practice is about intention, and psychedelics as a healing agent and really a medicine, I think, are it's important to include intention as part of that.
That makes total sense. Now, if we are, so let's say somebody has a meditative practice and maybe they're like me, it has its moments, right? It sometimes, some days are good, some days are seemingly the mind never stops wandering. Can you talk a little bit about how somebody may incorporate, and let's lump psychedelics and cannabis, all of the plant medicines that we discuss here together. Um, and of course, nothing, none of this is legal advice or medical advice, but how have maybe clients that you've worked with or yourself, what are some ways to incorporate the plant medicines with the practice that may enhance those meditations?
Yeah, so people who feel like they may be stuck in their meditation practice can often find that taking psychedelics has the effect of clearing out their minds and opening new pathways for practices to have a refreshed feeling to it. I've certainly had this experience. So, for those who are trying to incorporate a meditation practice into their daily life and are feeling like they're running into the same blockages over and over again, then it may be useful to think about uh, including a small dose, even a microdose of your substance of choice. In my personal practice, that substance will often be psilocybin mushrooms. And going through your normal meditation routine with the inclusion of that microdose as an amplifier for your experience. And what one might often find is that there are certain habits within your brain that are creating this blockage in your meditation practice. There might be certain limiting beliefs that come to the forefront, and you're able to identify that you may not have been able to identify otherwise without the psychedelics. And so these plant medicines can simply be thought of as tools to bring more heightened awareness into our everyday being and thinking and behavior. So, if you include a microdose, you might have a slightly amplified version of your normal meditation practice. If you include a larger dose in your meditation practice, you might find that there are layers that were previously unseen and latent, living under the surface, that start to come up. And this is where a lot of shadow work happens in psychedelic spaces and also in meditative spaces. The Tibetan word for meditation is gom, Gom. And the translation in Tibetan is to familiarize oneself with their mind. And so that's one way we could think about the goal of meditation is to become familiar with ourself, develop self-awareness, really come into contact with our truth, who we truly are. And psychedelics can be an incredible ally in helping us discover that truth and also helping us dispel the stories of who we're not. It often happens that in trip spaces, people will come to realize, hey, I'm living my life in a certain way according to these certain expectations, and that doesn't actually feel aligned with who I am. So, bringing it all back, if you're at home and you're developing this meditation practice and you feel like you're running into certain blockages, or you might feel like you're just open to a new creative boost, you want to, feel something different, you want to include new perspectives, then there's many resources you can go to. You can, of course, under the guidance of a trip sitter, make a kind of an informed routine for how you can include psychedelics in your meditation practice. The most common way to do that is by these days in the pandemic by signing up for an online course on microdosing. There's a website called Third Wave that has a wonderful microdosing course, and that'll have bits and pieces on how to microdose safely, how to find a dose that fits into your lifestyle and is not disruptive, but is beneficial. And then if you want to take it the next step further, you can also find a psychedelic integration coach who will most likely be well versed in how to take a psychedelic that you're interested in bringing more into your life and use it to amplify your meditation, amplify your relationships, amplify your work, your creativity. So those are just a couple of directions that people can turn to.
Fantastic. And I had some questions pop up when you were describing, like if you wanted to even just, deepen your meditation. It occurred to me that, there are different types of meditations, and I was wondering that if you, in your experience, if there were certain types that seem to be more synergistic with perhaps microdosing. For example, I find ones that I'm listening to with, closed head headphones and that have like, a really well done soundtrack, that kind of guided meditation. That really takes me to a place if I'm microdosing. But I didn't know if in your experience there were certain, like you said, there are so many types of meditation. I was wondering if it happens to enhance one type more than others.
Yeah, I think I would be mistaken to make a comment like mushrooms synergize perfectly with compassion meditation, but not with mindfulness meditation. I would think of it more in terms of what are you looking to get out of in your life? What are you wanting to step into? What values and virtues are you wanting to cultivate? And if compassion is a theme in your life that you want to include in your meditation practice, that you want to develop more fully, then microdosing and practicing compassion meditation is probably a really good idea. If you're hoping to create a deeper relationship with your physical self and your body, then I might encourage you to explore body scan meditations under the influence of the medicine. So again, I think of psychedelics not as having a specific agenda, but having a beautiful amplification effect where we can see more clearly what's already under the radar in our minds and in our hearts too. So that's my suggestion: is to understand what are you trying to develop right now, and how can you find a meditation that addresses that specifically.
Yes, yes. And I love that amplification message. And I think that, before we started recording, you and I talked about something that's kind of the flip side, because if you're meditating, there may be two things going on. One is the positive benefits, and then two is maybe that struggle that many of us feel to kind of take that monkey mind offline. And that's where psychedelics have been shown to be very effective. So if you could talk a little bit about the intersection between psychedelics and that default mode network that is often running the chit chat that makes it seem like meditation is more challenging for some of us.
Hmm. Yeah, so just for some background for those who aren't familiar with the default mode network, it's a region of areas in your brain that collectively create what we might consider to be the ego. The default mode network lights up when we are thinking about what in the scientific literature is called our autobiographical self, when we're thinking about I and me. It's also lit up when we're daydreaming, when our mind is wandering, and when we're basically mm, feeling a little bit disconnected from our present moment experience. So there's an interesting study where they took long-term meditators, people who have spent 10,000 hours in silent meditation, and they put them under a functional MRI machine, and they found that when these people started meditating, they could almost manually lower the activation of their default mode network. That is to say, just by going into their meditative state, they're lowering the DMN, they're reducing the mind wandering, they're reducing the amount of self-identification, and they're becoming more present, essentially. And an interesting thing that they found when they put people under LSD under the same fMRI is that they noticed almost the same exact thing, where the default mode network, instead of being a more gradual shutting down, people who were tripping essentially was like a switch that just shut off. So what does that mean? What does that feel like when the default mode network is off? Well, what happens when your autobiographical self is no longer running the show, right? You are immersed, your awareness is merging with your environment. And if you're meditating, that might feel like you're dissolving your ego and you're connecting with the greater world around you. Or it might mean that your mind is so focused on just the inhale and the exhale in your body that there's not a single thought that's drawing your attention away. What does that mean under the context of psychedelics? Well, when the default mode network is off, we have this increased susceptibility to our immediate environment. And this is why it's so important to surround yourself with positive people and be in a nice, calm, safe place. We talk about set and setting being the two important ingredients to a psychedelic journey. And I think in large part that's because when the default mode network turns off and your awareness suddenly shifts from being about me to being about, wow, look around. Like, this is the world that I live in and this is who I am. Feeling that merging and that connection, it's so important to be around good people and in a good place. If you craft the environment correctly and then the default mode network turns off, you could have the kind of experience where you're looking at a beautiful pine tree and realizing that you are so deeply connected with this pine tree, and you might want to give it a nice big hug. But if you have that default mode network turn off and you have this feeling of deep presence, but you're with someone who doesn't make you feel very safe, then that's going to encroach on your trip and your experience, and it may leave you feeling very unsettled. And so the same goes for meditation. When you are in that meditative space, and over time we practice, you know, removing our identification from our autobiographical self, then we come into contact with the world around us. And as the Taoists say, there's the 10,000 joys and sorrows that we come into contact with then. We start to feel the joy of the world and the pain of the world. And this is ultimately what happens when our ego dissolves, the default mode network turns off. We find our awareness emerging with the world around us.
Ooh, I love how you describe that. And thank you for bringing the attention to that fact that set and setting is also very applicable for your meditation process. That makes complete sense. And I was unaware that the 10,000-hour meditators were also able to take their default mode networks offline. And I'm wondering if, for example, like I said, if that default mode network is running this train of thoughts that we would love to derail and be able to like drop into this thoughtless meditation that we hear about. Well, we all know that we've all seen the headspace meditation animations that says it's not that you have no thoughts, you just watch the clouds go by. But I think a lot of us would like fewer clouds to go by. And do you find that using perhaps microdoses of psychedelics is effective as like training wheels to help people get to that place? Because I feel like I'm gonna judge myself right now that I use it almost like I don't use it every time I meditate, but I feel like, oh, if I really want to have a good meditation, I am going to need to take a microdose of something, so it's more like a crutch. Do you think there's a role for it to perhaps be like training wheels to help people get to the point where they don't necessarily need to use that?
Hmm. Training wheels is an interesting metaphor. Uh, I think in my own life, my meditation practice has been absolutely amplified by micro and macro doses of psychedelics. Um, However, am I don't want to create an association here where having a good meditation is conditional on taking some kind of substance. In many cultures, there is a standard practice that, every day we are asked to follow. And that could be meditation or yoga or any number of things. And then every once in a while, there could be a ceremony. And the ceremony is meant to serve as um, sort of a timestamp where we say, okay, we've been doing the practice. Now let us use the wisdom of the medicine to inform where we've been and where we're going forward from here. So I think there's absolutely a place for psychedelics to be included in your meditation practice as long as it's intentional and as long as you feel like your success as a meditator is not attached to your use of any substance.
Nicely put. I like that, Nate. You're very good at shaming nobody and including everybody. I like this very much. But also pointing out that like yes, essentially because the way I was phrasing it like as a crutch is negatively judging my other meditations as being not as good. And I think what you're saying is there's a place for all those meditations and they're all, they all have their benefits. Some may be just different. Maybe if the ones that have a little psychedelic in them, those may feel different, but there's still benefits to the practice regardless. I would love to move now into the discussion of how people can get to, somewhere nearing or approach a psychedelic type altered state through meditation. Can you talk a little bit about I mean, I'm not asking for here's the 3 steps to do it, but like, just kind of like as we were talking about before, like some of the phenomenology that can be in common between the two states and a little bit about how perhaps people can bring that themselves closer to that state with meditation only.
Yeah, so meditation is, like I said, becoming familiar with the mind. And in another way of looking at it, it's essentially the practice of observing our human experience. Now, parts of our human experience are exceptionally boring and mundane.
Hmm.
And sometimes when we're meditating, that's really what we're getting, right? It feels very unexciting. And sometimes it can feel frustrating to have our meditation be very gray like that. But, if you stick with this practice of becoming familiar with the human experience can also include incredible brightness, incredibly colorful states of awareness. You know, Overwhelming sadness and overwhelming joy are all part of what we've been given as humans. And anyone who spent enough time meditating is really familiar with all of those. So when I think about your question, I think about what does it mean actually to embody this altered state of awareness through meditation. Now, if you're looking for an extreme experience where you are your heart is overflowing with universal love, that's a beautiful intention to set, and meditation can absolutely help you get there. But whereas psychedelics can be thought of almost as like an elevator that brings you right up to the top, meditation is more of like a long and winding staircase So there's a level of persistence and patience that we need to have in this practice in order to develop um, these deep states of consciousness. With that being said, there are certain practices that tend to go quicker than others. Um, I've referenced compassion practice a lot. In Sanskrit, it's called metta, which translates to loving kindness meditation. This is one of my favorite kinds because I've introduced metta to people who've never meditated before, and within one session, within a few minutes, they could really feel that sense of open-heartedness, that connectedness with the people around them and with the world. um, there's also another type of meditation, which is a form of breath work called holotropic breath work. This was first introduced by a psychologist called Stan Groff, and it's not a practice that I myself am super familiar with, but those that practice it often share that when they do holotropic breath work, they're often in very profound states of awareness that resemble psychedelic states. So I want to just bring it all back for a second, and to the listener who's listening to this question, this conversation, and asking themselves, how can I meditate so that I feel like I'm tripping? I would encourage you to perhaps challenge the notion that meditation is supposed to get you there, and that the goal of being a human is to have such an extreme experience where we feel like we're tripping all the time. And ask yourself more, if you've had psychedelic experiences that have felt really meaningful to you, you could ask the reverse question, which is, what are the values I've received from these medicines? And how can psychedelics inform my meditation practice?
Ooh, I love that because I love how you brought out the connected feeling, because I wouldn't say that I necessarily equate that with a trippy feeling, but definitely that is an aspect that I have experienced on psychedelics, is that connectedness. So it's not that I think necessarily all meditators or any, but whether or not they want to walk around feeling quite like they have that intoxicating high, some of the, I don't know, the visuals or the tingling or whatever, but I do imagine that it is quite the benefit to walk around and at least be in that connected state that psychedelics brings us into. So thank you for bringing out that kind of thing is possible even through these without having been a 10,000 hour meditator. Like you said, beginning meditators experience that. So thank you for bringing attention to that. um and as we're wrapping up, we've learned a lot. I would love to hear if there's anything left that you love to touch on that we have not. And by the way, to the listeners, we will have somebody on talking about Stan Groff's breath work and how that works and its interaction with psychedelics. So thank you for bringing that up, Nate, and teasing that for us. And we'll definitely do a deep dive. But anything else you want to cover in this realm? And before I ask people, or before I ask you to tell people where to find you.
Mm. Yeah, well, thank you so much. This has been an awesome conversation. I would say to people out there who are either beginner meditators or advanced meditators, just to serve as a reminder that um, meditation as a practice is not about really forcing ourselves to have some experience, but to train our awareness, to become a more whole person, a more fulfilled person, a more loving person. And there's an analogy I often use where, our daily meditation practice can be like our daily hygiene. Think about your home. Your daily hygiene could be, taking a shower or wiping the counter in your kitchen. And taking a psychedelic can be like bringing out the fire hose, where you are getting all of the dirt and the muck out from the corners of your house that you haven't been able to reach in your daily hygiene. So these two absolutely support each other because we need the daily hygiene to keep ourselves fresh and clean. And psychedelics can be thought of as when, when enough has accumulated that we can't quite reach with our meditation practice, then psychedelics can be an amazing tool to bring it all out. And once that dirt has come out from the corners and has settled, then what do? You bring out the mop, you bring out your Lysol wipes and you get back to cleaning. So this, you said earlier, this is a symbiotic relationship between meditation and psychedelics, and I absolutely believe that. Um, they support each other 100%. You can include psychedelics in your meditation, and you can include deep meditation in your psychedelics. So I hope people take the time next time they're involved in a plant medicine space to bring in more inward focus, include a deep intention in their journey, and remember to be kind to yourself and to celebrate.
Ooh, I would say mic drop, but neither of us are holding a mic. But Nate, you're awesome. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that analogy of that, the daily hygiene versus the spring cleaning. I think that's going to be really impactful for a lot of people when they're figuring out the role that these different practices will have in their lives going forward. So I cannot thank you enough. Can you please tell people where to find? I know you are starting a new journey in your master's program, but where can they find more about you and your work?
Yeah, sure. So I have a website, natemacanian.com, and I host meditation classes through a few different platforms, and you can find me on my website to see what my schedule's like. Also, just feel free to reach out if you have questions after you've listened to this, or you just want to pop in and say hey. You could find my contact on my website. It would really make me very happy to hear from you. So thank you, Lynn Marie.
Oh, thank you. And I'm spelling out your last name for everybody in case they don't. But the website is Nate, Macanian, correct?
That's
M
right.
Macanian. In case anybody thought you were Irish and it was Macanian. So I want to make sure that nobody misses the A and everybody can find you. And I just wanted to send you my utmost gratitude for coming on and sharing with everybody today.
All right. Thank you so much, Marie. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Palms
Well,
together. Enjoy the journey.
thank you, Nate. And for everybody else out there, until next time. Thanks so much for listening to the Plant Medicine Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave us an iTunes rating or review. It helps other people find the show. And if you'd like to find out more about plant medicine, including the show notes from today's episode, please head over to plantmedicine.org. The music for the Plant Medicine Podcast is by the incredible Porangi. If you'd like to check out his music, please find him at porangi.com or on social media at PORANGUI.